Hello, my name is Amy Wood. I am the Executive Director of the Raymond A. Wood Foundation. I got a chance to sit down and talk with Kathy Riley, the Vice President of Family Support for the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation. Kathy leads the foundation's efforts to develop and execute family support programs for more than 28,000 patients and families impacted by a pediatric brain tumor diagnosis. As a certified health education specialist, she has spent more than 20 years addressing the needs of hundreds of these families by providing information, community resources, and emotional, social, and educational support. Kathy herself is a caregiver to Peter, a pediatric brain tumor survivor. And today she shares a little bit about her experience in the brain tumor journey, how she came to work for the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation, some of her experiences with self care, and some information for how you could become an advocate or help out with some programs to help other pediatric brain tumor families. So, without further ado, let's meet Kathy and hear her
My
story.
personal brain tumor story with my son Peter began many years ago in 1993 when he began experiencing unexplained headaches and vomiting. Um, we really felt like he was allergic to a certain type of food he was eating. We searched for all the normal, quote unquote, normal answers we thought that there would be for Peter. We went to our pediatrician numerous times, who assured us that Peter was presenting as a classic textbook migraine and that there was really nothing to worry about. Um, and so and I remember in those early days before we received Peter's diagnosis, him sitting in front of the TV to watch cartoons, and he was 5 years old at the time, and just putting his little hands on his head like this and just going, ow, ow. And then he would eventually throw up and then go to sleep. And so, because those symptoms increased in frequency, we kept going back to our pediatrician and finally got a referral to a neurologist who took a look at our son and said, I don't think there's anything concerning here. Let's do an MRI just in case there's something more going on, more serious going on. And so that's how we went into the diagnosis. Was our son's been having headaches, he's a little clumsy, and we think he's allergic to these three foods. And you have to think about that. Back in 1993, there wasn't the internet, so we weren't Googling headaches and vomiting, stumbling. So the day we had the MRI, we went in very innocently thinking we're going to figure out how to help his migraines. And we were really concerned that he not be anesthetized in that MRI. And so my husband was able to go in with him. They pretended like they were astronauts going in a spaceship. They came, that's my calendar, I apologize. They came out of the MRI. The radiologist came in and said, are you going to be home later today? Because I think we'll have the results for you. And still, I think as a parent, our job is to protect our kids and to dream big dreams for them. And we don't ever think of anything like this happening to our child. And so we commented as we left the MRI that these were some of the nicest people that we'd ever met, and how great that they were going to call us with results this afternoon. And we celebrated on the way home with milkshakes at McDonald's. And then you get home and the answering machine is flashing and you call the pediatrician, and then things, I felt like things happened in slow motion after that, and that things unraveled piece by piece is the only way I could describe it. And we went back to the pediatrician, we got our scans, we were told there was a growth, and that was all we were told. And we went to the local university hospital with our scans. And I think I remember very specifically having our son, in one hand and our scans in the other. And I think I can still see that threshold from the parking structure into the ER. And it felt like we were entering a world that would change our lives forever. And we gave our scans to the neurosurgical resident, a young woman who came back with news, almost as if she was excited. And she said the words, "Wow, that's an impressive tumor." And that was so, I think it was almost as if the force from her breath just knocked me down into my chair. And then things, that was tough news. And I often think back at that time, and I think what could have changed that moment for us, and or maybe helped us as we received that news of our son's brain tumor diagnosis. And I think if she had said something like, "What do you know?" And then we could have explained what we knew. And she had to deliver that news, but it could have been delivered, I think, in a context where she had more information and could understand our story before she delivered that news. And then our son had surgery. And then for a year after that, he had chemotherapy. And then in the first, about a month after surgery, he also had 6 weeks of radiation to the brain and spine. And he had a really challenging time recovering from surgery. He had something, his tumor was medulloblastoma, had something called posterior fossa syndrome, where he couldn't walk, talk, swallow. He was agitated. And it took months for that condition, to slowly improve. And he completed treatment. And now, we're decades past that and seeing a lot of the late effects of that. I think the presence of the tumor, the surgery, and then the treatment that he received in that year following surgery. And he has had 3 additional tumors secondary to all the radiation that he received, which we have had surgically removed. He has had late onset seizures and some hearing loss. And so, lots of challenges. And yet I often say, and I'll say this forever, he has the best heart of anyone I know, and he brings such joy to, to our lives. And so we've had 25 plus years in this world. And, I think I would say, that our life is not what we planned. And certainly our dreams for our son took a blow. I mean, they exploded, and we had to, mourn the loss of those dreams for him. And I think every day have to deal with the struggle that he's not who he would have been. But, waking up every day, embracing what we can of new dreams, for him.
Thank you, Kathy. If you had a chance to go back in time from where you are now to when you first heard the news of your son's diagnosis, what would you tell yourself?
I and as I think about that, I think if I could give any advice to my younger self, I would say take more deep breaths, appreciate the moments of a day more, appreciate the days more, and it's going to be okay. And you know, I think that though at the time you're so traumatized as the parent, and because this is not something that you're equipped or trained for, you know, we're not trained for trauma, you know, to happen to our children. And we were so young when this happened to our son. So and then I think another piece of advice I might give myself is that you're going to meet some heroic people that are going to come alongside you and help you carry this burden no matter where this journey leads. And I think that's an important piece, is that I did meet people along the way who made me feel less alone, and that kind of support is out there, and that I would have more meaningful relationships with humanity than I ever imagined, and that people do show up and do come alongside you.
Would you say that you have come to a place of acceptance in this brain tumor journey?
I would say that acceptance is not um, a word that I would use to describe where I am today. I don't think I have, um, you know, and maybe this is just how you define the word acceptance, you know, but for me, it almost feels like a little bit like a resignation, and I I don't in a way accept what happened to my son, but I would say that I make readjustments because it is the reality that we face. And I think I go back to having permission to grieve what we lost, and I think that permission was granted to me by a parent who had lost their child to a brain tumor and heard me describing some of the losses that Peter faced, and she said, no one has given you permission to grieve. And in a way, it was almost as if she was saying, I give you permission. And I think that could only come from another parent who had the most profound type of loss. But I think in that granting of her permission that it was okay for me to grieve, I was able to readjust and begin dreaming again. But just because I'm dreaming again for my son and their different dreams, it doesn't mean I've accepted what has happened. I'm just responding to it because I must, because I love my son and I want the best possible quality of life for him. And you know, many of those new dreams were ordinary, and they aren't going to come true. But some have come true. He got to go to his high school prom. That's a dream we don't even really think about that. I didn't think that that was a dream for my other healthy children. But for Peter, I that was something that was a new dream. I was like, wow, I wonder if anyone will care about him enough to go to the prom with him. And then he went with a friend, and it was beautiful. And then graduating from high school with a diploma was another dream that was fulfilled. And I think this ties nicely into what I said earlier about unexpected heroes that come alongside you, which I hope is encouraging to others. That when Peter graduated from high school, it was the first, and I've shared this story with some others, but it was the first high school that was built by our school district in, I don't know, like 30 years or something. And so all of the elites from the school board and the district were there in this mosh pit below the stage. And my son still struggles with balance and coordination. And I was just so anxious because I thought they'll call his name. He'll walk. If he makes it up onto the stage, he'll walk across. He'll fall off into the mosh pit of school officials. And because that's kind of how life is for our family. And so when they called his name, the most amazing thing happened. The entire senior class rose to their feet in applause because they knew that he had worked harder than anybody else. He wasn't going to Harvard. He wasn't going to Yale. He wasn't even, going to go to, a different, he wasn't going to go to a 4-year program anywhere. And yet he received the applause of his entire class, and nobody else got that kind of applause. And so those are things that I look back on, to tie in this answer to your previous question about what can I tell my younger self. I think that's one of the things, is that there will be unexpected gifts of the goodness of humanity that will come.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Kathy. So how did this journey lead you to your work with the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation?
So this work did lead me to the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation. I would never have worked in nonprofit, certainly not in pediatric brain tumors, I think, without my son's diagnosis. About 2 years after he was diagnosed, I met another parent whose son was a similar age and had the same type of tumor. And both of our boys had similar struggles post-surgery and with delays in cognition, physical disabilities, some other challenges. And a hospital staff member introduced the two of us, and I was just slightly ahead of them. We had completed treatment by the time they started. And this other mom and I shared resources. We talked. We talked about the emotional challenges, the school challenges, the challenges in the medical field, the challenges finding the right therapies for our children. And it was such a beneficial relationship. We just one day said to each other, wouldn't it be great if we could extend this kind of relationship to others? And we really searched for a support group out there for pediatric brain tumor families, and there wasn't anything. There were a few things for pediatric cancer, but nothing that was addressing the multitude of challenges that we were seeing in our kids because of the impact on their brain. The brain is so eloquent. So out of that friendship, we formed a support group that grew over a period of years into a statewide initiative that offered emotional support and information to families. And we started with 12 parents, and that grew into hundreds of families that we supported across the state of California. And that nonprofit was called We Can Pediatric Brain Tumor Network. And that came to the attention of the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation. In about 2014, I knew the founders of the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation, Mike and Diane Trainer, but there was new leadership in, probably 2012 on. And I met the new CEO and began to have a nice professional relationship with her. And the PBTF invited our organization to merge and become part of the PBTF, and we did in 2016.
Would you describe your role at PBTF?
My role at the organization, I'm vice president of family support. So my role is set the strategic direction for the organization of how we'll support families, and to do that thoughtfully. And I think because I'm a parent, before we began, now almost, I've been with the organization just about 5 years. And before we began to look at how we would set that strategic direction, I wanted to hear from families. Even though I was a family, it was my journey is my journey. It's not everyone's journey. And everybody faces this differently and has different challenges. And so we conducted a community health needs assessment and published the results of that in 2018. And that helped us to categorize the needs families have into 4 general areas. And so those areas are, the first one is emotional distress and social isolation. That's the primary need that families have. The second was logistical complications and financial distress is another area. The third, families want accurate information about the journey. And the fourth area is families face educational and vocational anxieties with their children. So we have developed now a number of programs and resources in response to the needs that our families tell us that they have. And some of those resources are informational resources like our Starfolio newly diagnosed notebook for families. We have a survivorship resource guidebook. We host webinars on a regular basis, and we've collaborated with Raymond A. Wood Foundation on one of those. We have some online support groups and a peer-to-peer program to help families emotionally in their journey. And that is my role and kind of my department's role at the PBTF. We are a national organization, so we're all across the country, and we look for ways to connect with families personally on a daily basis. We have lots of phone calls with families. We have Zoom meetings. We're still coming out of the pandemic, but when we're able to resume in-person events, we have fundraising events across the country, and we welcome family participation in those events because we understand because families tell us that feeling alone in this journey is a primary experience that they're having, and that they feel very isolated. And so we really look for opportunities to bring the community together. If I step that's kind of within the organization, but if I step back now and I look at the disease space as a whole, uh, we ask ourselves, what impact can we make as organizationally in the pediatric brain tumor world? We fund research for all different tumor types. Um, we want to find cures for pediatric brain tumors. We also want to find cures that are less caustic, because we're tired of seeing children pay the price for their cure. We want no survivor of a pediatric brain tumor to be lost in transition from pediatrics to adulthood. You and I have had these conversations before. What can we do to step into that gap and ensure that every child who has a diagnosis and survives, what can we do to ensure that those children have access to high quality care for the long term? And then we want to walk alongside a family no matter where their journey leads. So whether they're at diagnosis, in treatment, dealing with survivorship issues, or whether they've lost their child to a brain tumor, we put our arms around those families and walk with them and meet them no matter where they are in that journey. We want them to continue to know that they're not alone in that journey.
Thank you, Kathy. So you have this professional role around the brain tumor space, and you're a parent caregiver. So what do you do to take time for yourself and recharge?
I think that self-care is so important, and I think all of us would say that we could do a better job at it, and I'll say I could do a better job at it. I do very simple things every day. When I need a break, I am fortunate to have a backyard. And so I go in my backyard, and I live in Southern California, so I have great weather, and I have a garden. And a couple times a day, usually in the early morning and midday, I go out and I look at growing things, and I look at birds and trees, and I just take in the world, the beauty of the world. I take lots of walks. I love to hike, and then once a quarter, I plan a short day trip to just escape and think about something else. But I find that I have to schedule those, those breaks to take care of myself. But I would say that it has been the greatest honor and privilege of my life to walk alongside other families. And no matter what profession I have in future years, I'll always be a part of the brain tumor world, because I know what it was like for me to meet somebody else who had walked a similar road, and how important it was to know that I wasn't alone. And that is such a critical part of being in the pediatric brain tumor space. And as challenging as it is at times, it's a challenging world. It's, again, the greatest honor to walk alongside families in this journey. And it's healing to help others as well.
Along the lines of what you said, it is very healing to be able to have walked through this experience and help others on their journey. What are some ways that people can get actively involved in giving back or advocating in the brain tumor space?
Yeah, if somebody wants to give back and engage, um, we welcome them to reach out to the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation, because there are lots of opportunities to engage with us at different levels. Volunteering in one of our family support programs, like becoming a peer mentor. Families have expertise in different areas of the journey, and we welcome that. We welcome volunteers in that program, and we provide training. We welcome anybody who wants to advocate. We partner with an organization called CAC2, and also the Alliance for Childhood Cancer. And so we welcome anyone who wants to come alongside of us and be involved in, advocating for better treatments for kids, for um, for research. So we do a lot of work in advocacy, and we welcome families reaching out to us for that as well. And then I think that families also, some of the activities that we do that raise funds throughout the country, we have a walk run, we have a motorcycle ride, and engagement in those activities is so fulfilling. And it's a real, a tangible way to give back. And those communities of volunteers love to embrace families that come and engage and volunteer. And so I think there are lots of opportunities to do that, to engage with our organization on multiple levels, including getting involved in family support programs, getting involved in some of the fundraisers, and then reaching out to us to ask us how you can be involved in some of our advocacy work.
Are there any final thoughts you would like to share?
Oh, that's always such a that's a great question, and always a tough question. I you know Again, I almost feel like it's my older self again, looking back, at that young self, and um, giving that younger self a little more grace, and to say it's a long journey, and that I think in our disease space, lives are changed forever, and it's the lives of whole families that are changed. And pay attention to yourself and your needs, and get the care that you need, including therapy if that's needed. And um, pay attention to the needs of siblings and whole members, the whole, not whole members, but the entire family. And because it is a life-changing event, and no one remains the same. And we often talk about Peter's diagnosis. It's a moment that defines the course of all of our lives. We talk about before the brain tumor and after the brain tumor, and it's sort of an anchor story that has shaped the whole of our lives. And find others in this community to anchor with, you know, so that you're not floating out there alone because you're going to need support.
Kathy, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I think it was great to get to know a little bit about more about your personal experience. And if anybody wants to get more information about the activities and events of the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation, please visit curethekids.org. And I personally am involved with the peer-to-peer mentoring program with PBTF, and it's a wonderful experience. So if you've been in the brain tumor journey for a while and you're interested in helping other parents just starting out, it's a great opportunity. So again, curethekids.org. Thank you so much, Kathy.